Alef Meulenberg, the CEO of Rhiza Holdings, social entrepreneur and philanthropist, joins us for more insight as we continue, of course, to unpack what today's Freedom Day is all about. Alef, a very good afternoon to you and happy Freedom Day to you. So what tangible, impactful strides as well as programs do you think we can celebrate 31 years since the dawn of democracy that were actually aimed at addressing inequality in the country?
Thank you for having me on the show, and happy Freedom Day to you as well, even though I can clearly see you're working. I think the first and foremost aspect of freedom is that there's legal freedom. And I think that's been achieved when it comes to our Freedom Day, what we're celebrating today, is that everyone in the eyes of the law is equal, and that everyone is therefore free legally from oppression. And I think that's a massive step. So that's step number one for me. Step number two for me is then to say, what does that mean practically? What does that mean for all people living in South Africa? I saw the acting president, Matashi, saying that there must be unity, that there can't be one race that is oppressed and one race that is suppressed, or something along those lines. And I think that is the second thing where we're making significant strides as a country, even though sometimes it doesn't feel that way, is that the racial conflict that was there significantly before is getting less and less and less, in my eyes, at least, and at least in being in an interracial marriage myself, I can state to that personally as well. Then other things for me that are where we're making strides, but maybe not enough strides still yet, is that everyone at least has access to opportunities. And for me, those are opportunities when it comes to education, quality education, opportunities when it comes to socioeconomic development, but also opportunities when it comes to meaningful work. And particularly the last part, I think there have been strides made where people have access to jobs and where people have access to opportunities to at least get jobs and to get educated. But those strides for me are still incomplete, if you will. So I still think that we can make a lot more progress when it comes to that. But focusing on the positive, I think those are summarizing. There's legal freedom. There's freedom a little bit more when it comes to racial interactions, and a little bit more freedom when it comes to livelihoods as well.
Absolutely, Alef. Granted, we are moving, but albeit at a snail's pace. I mean, the glaring, ever-rising impact of unemployment you've just made reference to in creating an equal society. I mean, if you're looking at South Africa, we're currently sitting at a shocking 31.9% figure in the previous quarter, and we are the highest in the world, with young people as well as women forming the higher end of the spectrum. So surely we need new ways to actually include our citizens in the workforce, to be part of this ever-growing economy. But it seems our government just does not know how to manage the situation and navigate around it.
Yeah, I think it's a very tricky situation with having, like you said, having the highest youth unemployment in the world. So how we look at it from a Rhiza perspective is, in a South African context, we have to start creating new markets. So existing markets are not going to save us, whether that is government or corporate. So the only way we can really solve this issue is creating new markets. So how do you do that? How do you create a new market in a place that has limited affordability, where, like you said, youth unemployment and unemployment in general are arrived? So how we do that is by looking at programs where we can provide access to things that weren't accessible before. So let's say private healthcare. How do we make private healthcare accessible? By making it cheaper. So maybe we can replace a doctor with a nurse. And if a nurse then is the main healthcare provider, then it reduces the cost and creates a new market. And by virtue of doing so, you normally create jobs. And that's how we're looking at kind of the job creation issue in South Africa, is to ensure that the markets that we create in township and rural communities are markets that are relevant, are markets that are in high demand, but also markets that immediately create jobs. Because if we look at AI, and I saw it in the news, I think before, that it can take away jobs in the tele BPO kind of setting. It will also be able to erase jobs in retail and in other sectors. So we need to be creative around creating jobs. And for me, the only way to do that is by looking at communities where the jobs actually need to be created, and to create a more equal society. Firstly, by giving people access to opportunities, and secondly, by giving people access to markets that they didn't have access to before, and creating jobs in the process.
I mean, Alef, what do you still perceive then still to be existential barriers in this regard. And how do we then navigate around these from policy as well as further review of current legislation, right, that contributes to these social ills? The latest survey reports that the average monthly salary in South Africa in the third quarter of last year was just 28,220 rand. And this has further decreased and looks even worse when divided into the multi-dimensional racial groups.
So for me, the first thing I would look at is how do you incentivize entrepreneurship? So how do you make it easier to start a business? How do you make it easier from a tax perspective? The VAT threshold is actually quite low if you look at it. In other countries, it's much higher. So we start paying VAT at R1 million turnover, right? So for me, those things are kind of like demotivators for entrepreneurs to start new businesses. And then the red tape around starting a business is even a further demotivator for entrepreneurs to start businesses. Then we say local is lekker, but are we really investing in local manufacturing? If I look at the steel scenario currently in Newcastle, I think that's another thousands of jobs that are lost or that are potentially being lost at the moment. So are we really looking at investing in local manufacturing and local industry? So if those are things for me from a policy perspective that we need to ensure that are right, that it's easy to start a business, that it's easy to grow a business, and that people who do start businesses are rewarded, no matter where they come from, no matter where they are going from an entrepreneurial point of view. Obviously within the confines of the law. But the same applies then also to things like having local industry and investing in local industry and not almost villainizing entrepreneurs, but making them kind of the cornerstone of society. So for me, those are things that I think from a policy perspective can add to further economic growth and therefore jobs.
Very realistic views there. Alef, thank you so much for your input and enjoy the rest of your Freedom Day today. That is Mr. Alef Meulenberg there. He's the CEO of Rhiza Holdings, helping us find clarity on some key challenges that the country finds itself still battling with as we celebrate Freedom Day today.